So I'm sharing the screen with your photos. Here we are. Okay, here is the family of Pisiuk family, the owner of the bear factory. And would you share, please, about your family?
Yes. Now, at the right side is Mayor Hertz Pisiuk.
Yeah, that's him, yes?
That's him, correct. The daughter in the middle is Rachel Pisiuk.
So that's your mother. That's your...
No. Those are, let's go on. This is Rachel Pisiuk. This is Shulamit Pisiuk, his wife. The other one is Samuel Pisiuk.
I see.
The son those days. And this is my grandfather, Yehuda Lev Pisiuk. This is my grandfather. My mother is the daughter of this person. There's only one child missing, Simcha Pisiuk. He was born years later. He was born when he was born 2 years before my mother was born. So he is a young brother of these three brothers, two brothers and sisters, and family. It looks like at the area of the beginning of the 19th or something like that, because the person, my grandfather, he was born in 1886, I think. It's supposed to be 16 years old now here.
I see.
And about 12 years later, my uncle was born, and 14 years later, my mother was born.
I see. So they were not from, they both, the couple, Gersh and Sulamif, they were not born in Rovno. They came to Rovno later.
Yes. They came, I think that he came from Lita. That's what I think. And I don't know about her. I sent you the Polish passport.
I've been trying to find out, but I need to see to find out more, because it looks like it's a small village. I'm not sure exactly where it is.
Yes, of course. In those days, the area of Rovno was Polish by the hand of the Polish, so everything is in Polish. And yes, this is the family. This is the beginning of the family.
And all their children were born in Rovno already?
Yes, absolutely.
I see. So here we see his passport to go to Palestine. Yes, I think.
Yeah, that was, I'm not sure. I think it was his passport in Rovno itself. Let me see. You see that it is still in French as well. That was the diplomatic language those days.
Yeah, I see.
This is a Polish. This is a Polish.
To go, I think it's a passport to go to the Palestine. That's a foreign passport. That it
you
seems
think so? No, I don't think so. It's not in English.
This is the Sulamif. Yes, that's her passport.
Correct. This is
it says Nimyachin, but I'm not. I need to search where it is to find out. And she is a year older than him, but
she was older than him. Yes, she was older than him. Yeah, he was a spoily Jewish person.
See, it says the passport Polska, Republic Polish passport to go to Tel Aviv, Palestine.
Okay. Correct.
Consulat Tel Aviv. So he went to the Palestine and then he came back apparently in some.
Yeah, sure. This is what I see here. If you look at this at the left side, consulate, there is a signature in the consulate in Tel Aviv, the Polish consulate in Tel Aviv, because they have been, no, in 1933 or 34, they moved to Tel Aviv. And they moved to Tel Aviv, and they lived here until 1940. In the middle of the war, they went to the United States for medical treatment. But this is a Polish passport, but they lived in Tel Aviv those days.
I see.
They came in 1890, in 1933 or 1934, something like that.
And that's his passport as well.
Yes.
To Palestine.
Yes, and you see that this is the Polska, the Polish consulate in Tel Aviv, in 1935.
And I see that this is the beer factory.
This is the beer factory and the houses. They lived there.
In this house, yeah.
Yes, there were 4 houses.
I see.
And they all lived there in the area. Inside the factory. They had this program of letting the employees living in the area of the factory. So the area of the factory included the buildings, the family buildings, and the factory itself. This is original images. Original, and you see all the background is still as is.
Yeah, I recognize it. It's
factory, and there's another picture, 3 pictures all together.
Yeah, I see that the architecture is really astonishing, like those huge doors. And we are now
still there.
Yeah, we are now preparing the architectural book for Rovno, and I think that your factory will be also described. I'm not the specialist in architecture, but I see that those doors are very peculiar, and it's certainly certain style, and it's not just built like a box. It's built with a certain style, and I think it's fascinating, and I think
that the design. My grandfather, he was the manager of the factory since 1923, I think, or maybe before. And he actually studied mechanical engineering in Berlin.
I see.
And the design of the factory from Berlin.
Wow.
That's why the name Bergschloss is a very German name. Star on the hill. Bergschloss is the star on the hill because it is on a hill. And you see the wooden barrel. You see the wooden barrel at the left side.
Yeah.
You see the barrel.
Yeah, I see.
Which is very typical for wine and beer. Interesting.
Yes, and those are documents for the.
Yes, those are documents. Yeah, this is the documents. You know, he was living in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, I see here, Tel Aviv. Yeah.
He was the chairman. He was the chairman of the board. So he received all documents and all reports, annual reports. You're going to see annual reports later. So this is part of the official document of the factory. I don't understand what is really written there, but you see that at the left side you see telephone number 69 on the top.
Yeah,
left.
I see. Here it is.
Number 69. So there were very few.
I know. No, not many.
Days.
Not many had numbers. Yeah, I know.
So this is interesting. This is from just before the beginning of the war. Yeah,
I see 38. There was this 38. Yeah,
yes.
The 3rd of April. 38.
3rd of April, correct.
Yeah.
3rd of April, because 1st of April was the beginning of the new year, new fiscal year, financial year.
I see.
Every financial year end those days in March 31st, 31. That's the end of the year.
And here I see that he was given the silver cross.
Silver,
like,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
like a medal or
Yes,
from the
there was
Polish
a medal.
government.
I think it is a medal from the Polish government. Yes, it's a medal from the Polish government. He also received a medal for his activity, social activity, and yeah, you see, this is the 1933, just before he came here.
Yeah, I see. The
See?
10th of
Yes. It is.
10th
It comes from Warsaw.
Rady Ministrov. Yeah, I see the minister.
Yes.
So he kept. Let me check this scene. So he actually survived from the war because
He didn't. Yes, he immigrated to Palestine. So they lived here. They died. He died in 1941 in the United States. His wife died in 1942 in the United States. And in 1973, their son, Simcha Prat, and my mother, they brought their remains to be buried here in Israel, in Tel Aviv. So they reburied here in Tel Aviv, but they died in the United States. They died and they didn't know anything about what happens to the family.
Yeah. So that is their.
This is actually stocks of the or actions of the factory, and you see that the signatures. If you look down.
No, I see it. Pisiuk, I see.
Pisiuk and Pisiuk. This is Meir Herz Pisiuk.
I see here Sulamif and Strik. I see Strik.
No, Strik, correct.
Yeah.
Alexander Strik, right? Alexander Strik. Alexander Strik was the husband of Rachel Pisiuk. He was son-in-law. He was a son-in-law.
And that's your grandfather,
Leov. Yes, this is my grandfather.
I see.
My name Aryeh is after his name, Leo. Leo is lion. Leov is lion, and Aryeh is lion in Hebrew. So my name is after him, and my second year is after Meir Herz, after my grandson, father.
I see.
See here, yes, you see Lev Pisiuk, and all the guys there.
And your grandfather, your grandfather was left in Rovno, and he inherited the beer factory after his father.
He did not.
Is that right?
No.
No. Okay.
No. He did not inherited anything. What happened is that he was the manager, and when the Russian came in, they made him. They actually put him on a position of a manager. They took over the factory, but they left it as a manager. And then the Nazis came on. So when the Nazis came in, he was arrested, and he actually died in the ghetto of Lvov, just 2 or 3 weeks before the war ended. He was there with his son Ezra, and they were kept, and they left. They died just very few weeks before the war ended. So nobody really inherited the factory. It just went to the Russian, and then to the Nazis, and then again. This is both of them, Shulamit and Meir Herz, in Tel Aviv.
So it's so I was, as a lady, I was looking at the fashion, of course, and I just saw those I saw that's a scarf, and then I said, no, it's not a scarf. It's like fur coat.
It's like a coat, yes.
Yeah, and it's very Russian. Like I know that the ladies in Russia in those times, they probably not only in Russia, in England, in all the aristocratic families, many of them, they used to have those fur. I don't know how to say it in English, like a fur scarf, like manteau.
Yes, it's like a scarf. It's like a
scarf. So she's like passionate with this thing, and and he looks like a real gentleman, like
yes. She
always did.
She was the brain behind everything. He was the foreign affairs minister, but she was very, very into the business. She took all the important decisions, and he was doing what she told him to do. And she was a very, very smart and strong lady. That's what I know. That's what I heard. That's what my mother used to tell me, that she was behind anything. This is also something from the factory. It is in the year of, this is actually not during the war, but just before the war came. And it is again something like, you see Leo.
Shapiro, I think it's a commemorating the Shapiro, someone who was a prominent person.
I think that he was nominated to be in the member of directories. He was part of the board of directories, Leo Shapiro, and I know his daughter was in contact with my mother. She came to, and but I don't know about him very much. But this is again official document of the factory.
And here is 30 of April 1938. So it's just before the
just before the war started. Yes.
And I see here Leo Pisuk.
Leo Pisuk. This is my grandfather, and then Strik.
Yeah.
And then Samuel Pisuk. This is Samuel Pisuk is my. This is my mother's uncle. Berkovsky, I heard the name Berkovsky. He was, I think that he was the accountant officer of the factory.
I see.
Yeah.
And what do you remember?
And you see Rachel Strikova. Rachel Strikova.
Yeah, I see.
This is the wife of Alexander Strik.
I see. And I remember that visiting your family, then your mother, she shared about her house, living with her family. But did she ever share with you? Did she visit the? Of course, she supposed to visit the beer factory, but did she share with you? Was it allowed for kids to visit, and what she remembers actually about the beer factory?
Well, she remembered very well. They were not allowed to go to the factory itself as kids, but of course they took them to see the factory. She knew the workers. She walked around, but they were not allowed to go freely to the factory because the factory was involved with water and materials and biological things. So they were not allowed to go easily, just when they had a special tour with their family members. But they were walking all around inside the the garden and the yard of the factory. Yes.
And here we have.
This is the beginning. Yeah, this is again the beginning of 1938.
I see 38. Yeah.
Yes, 1938, the year before the war, and you see, it's again official. I have few. Of course, I have a lot of shares, as you see here. I have a lot of shares and papers and documents that have been sent to Palestine from Rovno.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much for staying with us. Visit us. It is like visiting Rovno. Since we are not visiting.
I had an idea to come to Rovno last year, but due to the coronavirus, I know. But I'll do that. I'll do that definitely.
Yes, but at this time, for me, it's like seeing you and like as if you would visit Rovno virtually, and just it's very nice to talk to you, and hopefully we will see you in person someday.